good? Awesome. I'm Shari. I'm going to be your moderator for this session, and I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves and kind of let them give you a short bio of who they are and what they do.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Dr. Jess Barnes. I'm a CEO and co-founder of a 20-letter program. And also, I consult to a med device company that is developing a subcutaneous infusion device. And one of the opportunities for that is in CBD.
Name's Bill Fisher. I am the board chairman of a pharmaceutical company, Diverse Biotech, and we are in the cannabinoid space. In cancer indications and also with biolactams.
Good afternoon, my name is Dan Sliva and I'm founder of DSTS Laboratories, and we are testing for the real efficacy of natural compounds and CBD. And I would talk more about the efficacy because this is actually what is missing in the testing.
Good afternoon. My name is Todd Griffin. I am the Chief Technical Officer of G2 Analytical. I'm also a professor of chemistry at Wingate University in North Carolina. Our company is focused on developing novel detection technologies, including new ways to screen for contamination and for confirming efficacy in CBD products.
All right, amazing. Thank you, guys. So to start off, we all know that CBD is in everything. It's in all matrices. And Big Pharma was watching, and it looks like they're getting involved. Dr. Jess, where do you think CBD is today in regards to science?
So I think it's a really exciting area. I talk with a lot of people, and I think everybody sort of characterizes it as sort of the wild, wild west. It seems that the promise of CBD is wide-ranging, and for a lot of folks, specifically for scientific background, that can be hard to wrap your brain around. And so I think the focus is to try to chip away to show data-driven efficacy in areas that people who are a little bit more scientifically minded can start to relate to the advancements of CBD as a class of molecules, because beyond CBD, CBG, CBN, these are all molecules that have real value. But I think because historically, sometimes the cannabinoids get the bad reputation of the THC, which has traditionally been bad, if you think about the reputation it has, that we need to really provide some data-driven support for people to think very differently and open their mind to the opportunities in different areas of disease to see the applicability of this class of molecules for what it really can be. And I'm hoping that with the approval of the first CBD-based medication last year, that this is a jumping off point for us to really expand and provide additional data sets in areas and proof of concepts for the next step and ability to look at that and beyond epilepsy in all sorts of different areas.
That was great.
I concur with my colleague here. What I see from a regulatory standpoint is probably the next hurdle. Right now, the FDA is deciding what and how to regulate cannabinoids in general, specifically CBD, since CBD has been classified as a Schedule 5 drug with Epidiolex. I believe that what we're looking at now is some release of some regulatory direction from FDA coming very shortly. I'd say within the next 12 to 24 months, you're going to see some significant regulations on the more pure forms, such as isolates, etc. I don't think that they're going to mess with the Nutra broad extract stuff. It's going to probably fall into the class of nutraceutical. And then we can all finally get what you've been waiting for, which is that it can be classified as a supplement, because right now they don't classify it as a supplement either. So we're all playing in this gray area at this moment. My company's more focused on synthetic developments of cannabinoids themselves, the molecule, and building upon that molecule to not only better the molecule from a stability standpoint, but from an efficacy standpoint. So pharma is here. Hi, I'm here. And we are building on cannabinoids. I'm not sure whether other pharma companies of course, I can't speak for them, but we're not as interested in the natural molecule. So I think that leaves a lot of room for the direct-to-consumer, non-prescription supplement industry to really thrive without the interference of big pharma, changing regulations to regulate the more broad spectrum extracts, et cetera. I think you're probably going to have a lot of room to grow in that area. But from a drug perspective, the development's most likely going to come from synthetic forms of cannabinoids, and that's where FDA prefers that we be.
Amazing. I want to expand a little bit on the topic of efficacy, since it's been brought up twice. Thank you. To our two independent laboratory personnel, how do you feel laboratories can affect efficacy in the market?
Okay, so, number one is to define what is efficacy. Because when I went through the floor, I saw some company claiming that they are measuring efficacy. So I asked this guy what they are really measuring, and actually it was the sales rep. And he was, okay, we are measuring efficacy. So I asked him how, and he didn't know. So please, you have to understand there is difference between efficacy and potency, okay? Strictly speaking, pharmacologically, potency is the biological activity. However, in dietary supplement industry, potency is a concentration. It means amount of biologically active compounds, in this case, CBD. Now, if you are talking about efficacy, we are talking about the biological activity. So now, you have CBD, you can test it in the lab. We have specific cell-based assays, so we can show that CBD is active. So to simplify it, we can take immune cells, we can induce inflammation in these cells, and if CBD is active, we can block inflammation. I don't want to go to the details. Okay, so now, you are gonna, these tests are expensive because these are cell-based assays, and so it's not cheap. So let's say you are gonna buy some CBD isolate from hemp, you can test it for the efficacy, and voila. So now you have really great CBD, and you are gonna put it into your product. Now, CBD is natural compound. However, pharmacology laws apply to all natural products as in the same way like they apply to drugs. So it means you are gonna mix your really good CBD isolate 99%, which is active, with something, and you have your product. However, because the pharmacology law is the same, some of the other compounds in your product can actually kill the activity of your product, of CBD. And so that is how it's really important to measure efficacy. Because it's nice, you can show something that, let's say it's true. However, in a lot of cases, what is written on the bottle according to the amount of CBD is absolutely not true. But what is, again, if it's true, still you don't know if you have efficient product. And that is what the customers, what they should have.
Yeah, I 100% agree with my colleague. Measuring potency is important. I certainly wouldn't discount that as being an important piece of information, but without the efficacy piece, you really do not know how well that particular dosage is working. And there seems to be a large gap of knowledge in terms of efficacy with cannabinoids. There's just not a lot of literature study on that. And so, as my colleague said, not only will it potentially kill off, but it could potentially enhance the effect of the CBD in the person. So, there is a lot of room for a lot of scientific studies to go into efficacy to figure this out, and that will help us in turn talk about dosage, which should come later down the road after you understand the efficacy.
If I may add something, you have to realize, again, that this is science. CBD absorption, because absorption is important for the activity, for the efficacy. CBD absorption is usually between 6 to 8%. You can mix it with oils, and you can enhance it by threefold. Let's say to something like 20, 24, 25%. Actually, in the lab, we have developed some autosomal nanoparticles, and with these autosomal nanoparticles, you can have practically 100% absorption. So you have to all the time, think what you are going to put in your product, how and what is going to be the real efficacy. And there is one thing, because if you are going to measure efficacy, you are not supposed to claim the efficacy, because we are still not, in the approved area of dietary supplements. But, this is strictly prohibited in dietary supplement industry to claim any efficacy. So it's kind of gray area, but, you want to have your product which is active. So that is catch-22.
So I'd like to offer sort of a different take on what you're talking about as well. So in the area that I'm working in, we identify that the bioavailability is a pretty significant issue. And even depending on if you were to take your CBD capsule in the morning, depending on what you had for breakfast, your absorption and your distribution throughout the body could be dramatically different. And this has been shown in the literature. Just a breakfast burrito, a fatty breakfast, can change the amount in your blood. And so as we start to think about what are the challenges that could be hindering progress in this area, one of the major ones is absorption and biodistribution. And the analogous answer to that, or question to that, is he was talking about 6 to 8% absorbed. So that other 92 to 94% of that product, if you ingest it and it gets into the stomach and the blood flow around the stomach then goes directly to the liver, these metabolites, that 94% that's broken down, sometimes develop stuff that your body doesn't really like. And that's where we see liver signals because of the breakdown of this large amount. And so in long-term studies, we might be concerned about the poking of the liver with these concerning metabolites. So we're trying to find a different way to deliver, whether that's through bioavailability with nanoparticles, and in our case, it is a subcutaneous infusion device. It eliminates that first pass effect. It allows us to dose a much lower amount and get that amount into the system, basically on par with what you might take in an oral position. But it addresses a lot of the safety concerns that the FDA is looking at. If you're thinking that CBD treatment might be not weeks, but months and years, what does that mean with that longer-term safety signal? And so with alternative ways to deliver, there could be opportunities to avoid these bioavailability issues, some of these toxicity issues, but still be able to see the benefits that could come out. So if you're doing a clinical trial and you're trying to understand whether CBD may or may not have an effect in disease X, and you're dosing orally, and the question is, well, did I not get a result because we weren't sure about what the diet was that people were taking in, and did we get therapeutic effects in the blood, and how do we know that? This is one way that we could avoid those pitfalls and have consistent dosing. Obviously, what Bill's doing, again, is a different, and I imagine that that's parenteral administration of these compounds, which would, again, avoid these types of issues and allow us to look at efficacy, but in a way that manages and takes into consideration these challenges we know that this brand new area is going to carry with it as well.
I want to ask you guys to break some things down. So we've talked about bioavailability. We've heard microencapsulating CBD, nanoemulsion CBD, and they've been used in tandem. Can you break it down to the audience how those words work in manufacturing processes and how our body breaks them down in the metabolites and how they work throughout our system?
I'll go. So bioavailability is a word that means the ability of your body to take something that you ingest and have it be in your bloodstream. So the bioavailability of a drug is never 100%. It can be close to that. That would mean that of 100 milligrams of aspirin that you take, 100 milligrams actually ends up in your bloodstream. With CBD, if you take 100 milligrams orally, our colleagues here on the panel are saying that somewhere between 6 and 8 of that might end up in your bloodstream. And on a very good day, with some of the tweakings and different ways to deliver that, it might be higher. So nanoemulsions and nanoparticles. The CBD molecule is a naked molecule. If you surround that molecule with something like a lipid or something like a particle that allows it to make it through your GI tract and then be exposed in your bloodstream, that might raise the bioavailability or amount in your bloodstream. So the issues that we're talking about are delivery methods, what makes it into your system. First pass effect is that for generations since, thousands of years ago, because we didn't always go to the grocery store and get our food, your body needed to be prepared to break down toxins in your diet. So all the blood that is servicing your stomach and your small intestine is immediately transported to the liver, where all that nasty stuff, berries and sticks that you might have come into contact with thousands of years ago, can be broken down so that you don't die of poison. And that is a benefit, but it also can be a challenge from the drug development area. So those are kind of the terms that we're talking, and we're trying to understand dosing. Dosing can be the amount that's in there. Bioavailability is how much is in there. And then nanoparticles and delivery are better ways to increase that bioavailability.
So, and the question is why only 6 to 8% of CBD is absorbed. So, you know it or? Okay, so CBD is water insoluble, and that is the reason why you have to prepare some delivery mechanism. For example, as I mentioned, these autosomal nanoparticles, because you can dissolve it in ethanol, prepare the nanoparticles. A really good size of nanoparticles is around 100 nanometers. For not scientific audience, it's really teeny tiny, so it means it's really nicely absorbed. So.
We have found the same absorption from nanoparticles from a surface area perspective. So what that means is, if I were to build a basketball out of CBD and expose all of the outer parts of that basketball to my body, then the surface area is only the part that is exposed. The center of that basketball is not exposed to my body. So if I were to take that same mass and create 100 golf balls, there's more exposure to my body from the surface of the 100 golf balls as opposed to the one single basketball, which is the concept of nanoparticles. It's a smaller particle exposes more of the product to your blood, so therefore you get more absorption. You do not get more absorption specifically because it's been broken down. You get the same on par, it's just exposing more as opposed to exposing less to your bloodstream. And that's why innovation, such as what Dr. Jess is developing, exposes specific amounts directly to your bloodstream that sort of bypasses your liver from breaking down those particles. The goal is to expose as much CBD to your bloodstream before your liver can turn it into something else and get rid of it.
Thank you for that explanation. I wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page of what those terms mean. So leading into in the marketing world, the nanoemulsions and microencapsulated CBDs, that's used a lot. And how does, and I know that, I don't know if in the audience, if you've seen that on retail packaging. It says it, they'll say it's been microencapsulated CBD, it helps with bioavailability. Where's the miseducation in CBD labeling in these terms?
I don't know if it's education, but we've tested many products off the shelf, and out of 70 products that we've tested off the shelf, 68 did not contain what was on the label. So it's not really education, it's more, if you put out a good product, I think you'll probably rise to the top. That's mainly what I've seen.
So I'll weigh in a little bit. So I had a customer bring me a sample, and they said it was quote unquote water soluble CBD isolate that was 100% CBD.
Right.
Okay, so that sounds great, but it's impossible because CBD is itself not soluble. We've already discussed that. What maybe hasn't been made clear is that to make it soluble, you add something to it, typically an emulsifier or something like that. That's the encapsulation part that we're talking about. In addition to making the particles very small, which aids in transport and things of that nature, it helps in the solubility aspect. Well, that ratio could be 20 to 1, 20 molecules of the emulsifier to 1 molecule of the CBD. So if you just do the math, it couldn't possibly have been 100%, it has to be something less. And so I think part of the education process that needs to happen is when we start talking about these novel formulations, we need to understand what we've done to formulate these new formulations so that when that is really just a starting ingredient for the manufacture of the end product, right? It's the incoming raw material for someone who's going to make an end product with that particular microencapsulation or nanoencapsulation or nanoparticles. So we need to make sure that they have a good understanding of what that product is so that they can formulate their end product better, which I think would aid in the labeling discrepancies we see a lot.
And this is actually interesting because you mentioned this, that the different products, they didn't contain the amount. What we tested in the lab, we tested the real efficacy to measure anti-inflammatory activity. And I can tell you, majority of the products really, really bad. And if you recalculate to the standard, some of them, they have something like 30% activity, and in others there was practically nothing. So that is the reason why I'm pushing, this efficacy testing, because number one, potency, it means concentration is number one, it's crucial. However, you have to look all the time for the real efficacy. According to the education, I would go to something, but sometimes you can read also in some publications. However, these are not scientific publications. These are some bloggers. It was one nice lady probably trying to push for CBD, and she started like that one. CBD is practically the same molecule chemically like THC. So, this is not true. And number two, I would say that is or practically number one, the biggest mistake and misinformation which is circulated again and again. We are talking about endocannabinoid system. And you can read, okay, CBD activates CB1 and CB2 receptors. This is total nonsense. Because these receptors, okay, this is pharmacology, the term from pharmacology. CBD is allosteric negative regulator. I'm gonna put it in the simple way. Focus on the negative and on the regulator. So CBD actually negatively regulates CB1 and CB2 receptors. So it means sometimes if the people overdose with THC, you can block this overdose with CBD. But I know endocannabinoid system and CBD1 and CB2, they are so sexy. So you can see, there's some marketers, they are, okay, we have great CBD, and yet this is going through receptors. No, I'm kind of upset with that one, because if in this business we are gonna start with the false information, everything is going down, because there is no credibility for it one. So.
And I would actually go further. It's not only the products, right? It can be different lot numbers of the same products, can have dramatic variability in the efficacy, in the potency, and all that. So it can be a minefield as you're trying to figure out what is true and what is not true. And I think one additional area that you could sort of look at is CBD is a benefit. And just like other molecules in medicine, it can be combined with other things to have synergistic outcomes in different diseases. And I know that Bill's company is one that really is looking at cancer as an opportunity to piggyback on the benefits of other molecules. But in general, we know that this is likely to be the case in a broad variety of things, whether that's neuroscience and things like epilepsy, whether that's in pain. There's an opportunity beyond just CBD and the cannabinoids as well. And so it's interesting to see how this would play out, as the colleagues were saying, that it can cause synergistic and one can be more active than the other, and it can inhibit and you can interact. I think it's also going to be interesting moving forward to see how, as we roll in other anti-inflammatories and other molecules that have complementary effects to really drive improvements in disease overall, it's going to be pretty interesting and fun.
So we're mentioning a lot about the miseducation, that there's marketing tools that are being done, they're stepping over the line on science, essentially, right? We're all scientists up here. For the individuals in the audience that are manufacturers, white labelers, what can they do to help their line of products, to help their manufacturing process to eliminate the miseducation? What avenues, or minimize, excuse me, yeah. What avenues can they take?
I would say if you're a manufacturer here, and this may sound like a plug, but it's not meant to be a plug at all, get a relationship with a lab. a good laboratory, testing laboratory, can help you understand the pitfalls that the labels from your providers are giving you, right? Every pharmaceutical company known to mankind does incoming inspection of their raw material. How many of you that are in here that are manufacturers inspects 100% of all of your starting material? Okay, there's a reason why people inspect 100% of their incoming raw material. So get a good lab on your side who can help you navigate some of those pitfalls.
And again, every new lot must be tested because, it's extracted from the plant and the plant could be different and, different conditions, different soils. And sometimes you would say you will receive COA, Certificate of Analysis. And I can tell you from dietary supplement industry experience, what we tested, some of these COAs are recirculated or they are totally false. And I can tell you on the example, we work also with some medicinal mushrooms, and we had we tested some extract from other company for the biological activity, for the efficacy, and they send us later on their certificate of analysis. And from the first site, you can see they are claiming they are extracting something which is impossible to extract. And after that, on the other certificate for totally, it was one was for mushroom, other was for green tea, again certificate of analysis from the same company, and they are claiming the same amount, really low, of heavy metals. So it means practically really low, below the toxic effects. But how the hell you can have the same amount of these compounds in totally different nutraceuticals or species? So this is, if you are buying something, be sure that, or how to be sure, that is the question. So it means retest it, to be really on the safe side. Because again, the people are recycling the stuff, and sometimes they're actually downloading the stuff from some websites, and they are gonna sell you something, and you really don't know. You are trying to manufacture, you wanna be honest, and you can end with total whatever.
Yeah, build into your pricing, testing the raw material, the active ingredient, so to speak, prior to your batch, and then again testing after your batch is formulated. Heat will change some cannabinoids from one to the other, CBDA to CBD, things like that.
And light.
And light. So it's probably best to test your raw materials prior to the batch and then after the batch to make sure that it wasn't accidentally diluted in a certain manner. Be honest with your customers, and then really integrity for yourself is probably one of the most important. If something goes wrong, don't just push it through. I don't think anybody would be doing that in this room. These all look like very honest people to me. So, but it happens out there a lot, and I know personally from some experience with getting fake COAs. So testing yourself is important.
And I'll add to that as well. When you're looking at COAs, make sure that you look at the picture. Make sure the picture that's on the COA matches what you received. Because a lot of the times they'll take their isolate or their distillate, their crude product, they'll test that, and then now they've taken that and they've diluted it, they've added it to MCT or whatever they're adding to it as their carrier oil, and then they'll sell it to you. And the other parts of manufacturing hasn't been tested, especially for safety. Because it's, as a manufacturer or a white labeler, it is your duty to make sure your product is safe. And environment changes can change the safety of your product. Just wanted to add to that because I'm also worked in a laboratory. So I wanted to switch gears here a little bit and talk a little bit about research in academia. I know, Todd, you're in academia, and so there are a lot of institutions that are coming out there now, and they're wanting to get into research. For example, Miami-Dade in South Florida, they have made a synthetic cannabinoid. They're working with, I don't know which pharmaceutical company they're working with, but they're working with a pharmaceutical company to create a synthetic cannabinoid. So what could academia, people...
You're talking about Dr. Phil Arlen?
No, Lay, Dr. Lay,
Okay.
yeah. What could people or institutions in academia or private institutions that want to come in the research of CBD market, what do you think that they should be focusing on to help propel the market?
That's a great question. So let me first say that we've been stunted in the United States because of the regulatory issues surrounding cannabis. So one of the first things that's going to help that is the deregulation of this plant material. And so we like to see industrial hemp. I'm from North Carolina. We do not have a medical cannabis program or a recreational cannabis program, but we have an industrial hemp program. So that has allowed some of the institutions, North Carolina State University, for instance, has come into the game, and they are on the grow side. So agricultural school, they've come in and looked at all types of plant genomics and things of that nature. I think there's a lot of room for our big universities to come in and to play in that area. And I think in terms of where people have grown cannabis in the past, there seems to be a really good understanding of how it grows, how it behaves, other things like that as it moves out into a different region. The plant itself is just so dang adaptive, right? Because it'll survive. It'll change the cannabinoids that it produces just to be able to be better suited to grow in your environment. And that's a shame when you're thinking you're growing a certain set of cannabinoids and the plant has to adjust because of climate issues, environmental issues, soil issues. And so the cannabinoids that you get out aren't what you expect. So I think there's a lot of rich research that could be done there by the different institutions. Me particularly, I'm interested in moving out of the lab and into the field in terms of testing. So I'm looking at handheld instrumentation that can be used for screening for pesticides. Pesticide testing is a very expensive and very time-consuming endeavor in the lab. If we had ways that we could move forward and screen in the field which ones have are above an action limit and then send those off for confirmation, that would reduce cost and increase the throughput of testing and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot of rich areas for research. And I didn't even touch on any of the biomedical or any of that. So.
Before I started my own lab, my own business, I have more than 25 years of academic research experience. And I was studying different natural compounds, but I knew that I am not allowed to touch anything from cannabis because it would be the reason for the immediate termination. However, when I started my own lab, I can touch whatever I want. Oh, okay. But anyway, the point is that because of the restrictions, there is still missing research, basic research of cannabis and the products and how they are working on the molecular level. My major field was oncology and immunology with natural compounds. And now, for example, I have data from my laboratory that we know with specific cancer, human cancer cells, we can specifically kill with different cannabinoids. And okay, you are not able to market it on your product that is anti-cancer treatment, so we are gonna be talking about some health. So if it's against invasive breast cancer, you're gonna talk probably about the breast health or to go around. But still more research is needed. Not recently, it was in June, I was checking what are clinical trials with cannabinoids supported by NIH. And there was only one open trial during the time for CBD. Otherwise, there was something like, during the time, something like 10 trials, mixture of CBD and THC. So because CBD is practically legal in all states, it's fine, but not all states, not in all states is THC legal. So it means still the research and basic research is restricted. So that is I think the major problem.
One of our drugs that we have developed was based off of the CBD molecule, cannabinoid molecule, in particular CBD. It's made in a lab, not in a plant, but because it was a cannabinoid structure, when we synthesized the drug at our CMO, but basically a place that does the synthesis for us, we could not ship the product out of the state where we synthesized it because it was a cannabinoid molecule-based product. And so it's really a lot of miseducation or just not knowing the laws or not up to date on the laws. Even lawyers for companies you deal with, I'm sure, are not cannabis attorneys. What I would recommend are developing a relationship with a cannabinoid attorney. There are a couple of very good ones. Rod Kite, I think he's in South Carolina or North Carolina. Asheville, yeah. Rod Kite's a good one. Jonathan at Frost Brown, they're another good one. They worked with Mitch McConnell to actually develop the Farm Bill. But get a relationship with a cannabinoid attorney, someone who's familiar and can familiarize the other companies that you're dealing with. I'm sure some of you have run up against someone saying, oh, well, we can't sell this in our state, or it's illegal here, or I know that's happened to you. When I was in the retail space for cannabinoids in 2012, people were looking at me going, you're going to jail, you're crazy. They had no idea what they were talking about. But if you have a relationship with an attorney, maybe you can draft an opinion letter for your company. These aren't that expensive anymore. They're basically the attorneys that are cannabinoid attorneys have boilerplate type documents that adhere to each state's law, and they will be able to get you what's called a letter of, an opinion letter, and that will help you to overcome some of the hurdles that you may have with other companies that are saying that your product may be illegal or they can't sell it or they don't want to. So think about the legal aspects and get a relationship with a cannabinoid attorney.
That was great. Yeah, we love the advice.
So following up on what you had mentioned, you're talking about the industrial and understanding the pesticide aspect, there's also a complete lack of understanding of how these molecules function. So if you look at the first CBD-based therapeutic that's approved, if you go to their mechanisms, their actual label, and you look at the mechanism of action, it is unknown. And there are other drugs approved by the FDA where we don't really understand the mechanism of action for that effect. But there's a huge area here that we just have no idea about. We know that these drugs should be acting on receptors, but which ones? What are the intracellular mechanisms that these different CBD, CBG, CBN, how do they complement each other? What are the different signaling molecules that they use? What are their different effects in different systems in the body? And this is an area that no one has been able to touch because of all of the biases that have been in existence for the past 30 years. So as we now look in the basic research and in the translational understanding, we need to know, how does CBD function? How does THC function? How do CBG and CBD together? What does that look like in vitro? So that we can then understand where those molecules might best be applied with respect to the disease indications, and which combinations and which of these would be best with non-CBD molecules. And I think this is an area that still people are very reluctant to get into because they don't want to jeopardize their NIH funding. Oh, should I be looking at this? Is this restricted? How do I order it? And then there's the additional component of, if I do order something to test, how do I know that what I get is actually what I ordered and that it actually is active? So there's all these pitfalls, and it's a real shame that we don't have something that's a little bit more uniform. I mean, look at what's going on in Israel. They're decades ahead of us. They know a bunch. Even when I was designing my PK study, I looked at a Dr. Meshulam publication from the 80s. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to start to dig in and make really granular, impactful experiments that we could use as a whole to move this field forward. And I really hope that there's an opportunity for folks to move in that way with a lot less concern about what the consequences will be.
Those are all great. I want to wrap things up with this last question. Where do you see the future of CBD? Big picture.
Well, I guess I'll jump in here. I see the future. This is in my mind now. It's not necessarily what's going to happen, but in my mind, I see nutraceuticals developing. The FDA will probably allow a lot of breathing room on that aspect. But I do believe that they're going to tighten up dramatically on the more concentrated drug forms, highly concentrated highly concentrated isolates in the 98% and above realm are most likely going to be restricted. The Nutra world is always going to be the Wild West. You know, it's just have a quality product that everyone will feel good about, and no one's going to poke holes in. No one's going to test your product and find out that there's nothing in it. And I think you'll survive. There's a lot of guys out there right now that last year they were in acai berry, and the year before that they were in Garcinia cambogia, and the year before that they were in green coffee bean. Those guys are the guys that are polluting this industry with garbage product, hype, claims. They're just really diluting this industry. When the FDA starts slapping people with lawsuits in a year or so, don't be part of it. Let them all fall by the wayside. You guys will gather up all of the customers that they are creating right now. Hopefully some of them will believe in CBD because they got burned with these idiots. And hopefully you'll pick them up. And it's just, can you last that long? It's you got a year or maybe two that you got to weather these morons. And then after that, I think that it'll start to settle down a little bit when the FDA starts coming out with regulations and slapping people around. That's my opinion.
Actually, I hope for this second version because this is the huge push for CBD on the market. And I guess this wave, that it's impossible by the FDA to stop this wave. But there is going to be some regulations.
So if you look at the drug therapeutic landscape, there are things that you can buy at CVS in a lower dose that you require a prescription for a higher dose. So I think while that's absolutely true, there is an opportunity to have a lower dose or less regulated area for more chronic or over-the-counter issues, and then more concentrated, much more powerful activity for things like graft versus host and significant surgery-associated pain or different things like that. So I think there could be an opportunity forward if, again, it's all about how they're thinking, and that, again, you need to make sure that what is being sold over the counter, like we've seen recently, doesn't have bad things in it and they're going to hurt people. And then the other comment that I wanted to make, and it's more of a hope than it is the way that I see things, but in walking down here today, I passed a family that is staying at the hotel, and the mom was walking, and the young teenagerish boy was looking at the CBD Expo signs. And, oh my gosh, CBD. And his mom said, just ignore it, close your eyes, don't pay attention. I would hope that as we go along, we can now get that mom to understand that CBD is not just associated with people smoking joints and getting high, that there is actual clinical benefit here, and then to try and educate their kids and understand why maybe it's not necessarily cover your eyes, don't pay attention to that, but gee, did you know that Uncle Joe used CBD cream on his knees and really has a better quality of life as a result? But you need to make sure that you understand that there are some risks, son, so be careful about what you and your friends do. So I'm just hoping that that will be the case.
And I'll just follow up with just a challenge to the audience. That guy who founded Apple, who was that guy? Steve Jobs. He said that he doesn't hire people and tell them what to do. He hires smarter people than he that tell him what to do. And so all of us sitting up here, we're trying to push the edge of science and introduce new tools into this community. Subcutaneous, linkers, microemulsions, these things didn't exist just a few years ago. We have no idea where they'll take us. My first introduction to CBD, there was only a couple different types of matrices that you found them in, tinctures, and now look, you go out there on the floor, expo floor, and there's all kinds of products, ranging from topicals to all kinds of products. I'll just leave it at that, right? And so really we're asking you to use your imagination as we develop the tools we expect you guys to take them and apply them in the CBD market.
That was great. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time. We really appreciate it.